To the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. Homage to the Supreme Buddha, homage to the Dharma refuge, homage to the great Sangha, to all three ever devout homage, to all worthy of respect, bowing with bodies as many as all realms atoms in all aspects, with supreme faith I pay homage. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions, subdue your mind thoroughly. This is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a visual aberration, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew or a bubble, a dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud. See conditioned things as such. Then we do a short dedication here. Through these merits, may sentient beings attain the rank of all seeing, subdue the foe of faults, and be delivered from samsara's ocean, perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. And we go on to do the short mandala offering. We're calling this as a vast pure offering that we're visualizing. We're making this offering to the Buddhas, to our gurus, so that we can once more achieve enlightenment through receiving their blessings, their inspiration, their guidance in our lives. So you can visualize those beings in the space before you as you make this offering. This ground, anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha field and offer it. May all living beings enjoy this pure land. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryatayami. Then finally, refuge in bodhicitta before the teaching. Again, we recite this once in English and then twice in the Tibetan, bringing to mind these 2 thoughts of finding true refuge, safe refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, seeing them as what will protect you on your path to awakening. And then also generating that motivation of bodhicitta that we'll also motivate on, or we'll meditate on shortly. But again, bringing those 2 thoughts to mind as we recite this. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. Sangye chodang soki choknam la jangchu bardu dakni kyabsu chi dagi chunyen gi pe sonam gi Dola penshir sangye drupar shog sangye chodang soki choknam la jangchu bardu dakni kyabsu chi daki chanyan gipe sanam gi dola penshir sangye drupar shog. Okay, thank you, Mary. So let's go ahead and do our meditation. Today I'm going to introduce you to a meditation that is something I wanted to mention in the context of this topic of concentration, this 5th perfection that we're working with. And many of you already know this meditation, but I thought I'd introduce it for those of you who don't know, and we can just start with that and then do maybe a few more minutes of working with the breath, and then I'll lead you in setting motivation of bodhicitta. But this is what's called the 9-round breathing meditation. I mean, one of the qualities that we always want to bring to our meditation is a sort of relaxation, a sort of letting go of any stress, tension in both our bodies and our minds. And so the 9-round breathing meditation is a wonderful way to do that. So it's based on a tantric teaching in terms of what are called the channels in the body. According to the Guhya Samaja Tantra, we have 72,000 channels on which the wind energies ride throughout the body. But there are 3 main ones that are involved a lot in tantric practice. They are essentially the right, the central, and the left channel. And these channels are kind of like straws. They're hollow tubes, and we visualize them made out of light. And the central channel is larger than the other two, the right and the left. The central channel is said to start right about this point between the eyes. And like the handle of an umbrella, it curls up to the crown of the head and then descends down in front of the spine to just about, I don't know, 3 or 4 finger wisps below the navel. So it descends all the way down to there. It's completely open. Again, want to visualize it as open. You can visualize it even as blue. It's kind of nice to work with colors with this as well. So you have this blue central channel. On either side of it are the right and the left channels. The right is red, the left is white. Again, they're slightly smaller. They start just inside the nostrils and they are parallel to the central channel, coming down again, following the same track. When they get to the bottom, just below where the central channel ends, they kind of curl around so that you have this sort of ability for them to go into the central channel as well as to go into each other. So there's kind of that little mechanism right there that we're going to work with in terms of the 3 sets of 3 breaths that make up the 9-round breathing meditation. So what we're going to do, again, it's good if you want to work with the blocking the nose. It's kind of effective to do that initially. After time, you may be able to do it without blocking the nose. But what we're going to be doing is we're going to inhale first time through the right channel, kind of visualizing the energy coming up and going down. And then visualize after you finish the inhalation, the exhalation coming up through the white left channel and out through the nostril. We're going to do that 3 times. So oftentimes we block the right when we breathe in through the right, block the left when you breathe out through the left. After that first round of 3, where you're breathing in through the right, out through the left, we're going to do the opposite. Breathe in through the left and out through the right. We do that 3 times. And then the last time we breathe in, we won't have any nostrils blocked. We're going to breathe in through both nostrils, bringing the energy all the way down to the lower abdomen, and then visualize it coming up when you exhale through the central channel, kind of clearing that as well. As you do this, you can think about clearing away sort of all the cobwebs of the mind, as well as any discomfort or stress in the body, anything that's an obstacle to your meditation. If you normally find that the mind gets very dull and sleepy, then breathe that out. If you find that your mind tends to be very scattered and excited, then breathe that out. So we want to just work with this idea of clearing away some of these things that helps us to go into meditation with a little bit more of a relaxed mind. So I will lead you all in doing this once, and then I will let you do it on your own as part of the meditation period. After you finish it, you can simply go back to watching the breath as we normally do, and then I'll lead you in a short reflection to set motivation. So we will begin with blocking the left-hand nostril. And again, with this visualization of these 3 channels, begin to breathe in through the right. And drawing the energy down to the lower abdomen, cover the right nostril, breathe out through the left. Once more, cover the left, breathe in through the right. Cover the right, breathe out through the left. Again, letting go of whatever it is that you feel is an obstacle in your mind or your body. Once more, cover the left, in through the right. Cover the right and out through the left. And keeping your finger over your right nostril, breathe in through the left now, drawing that energy down to your lower abdomen. Cover the left, breathe out through the right. And cover the right, in through the left. Cover the left, breathe out through the right. Again, letting go of whatever is blocking your mind or your body at this time. Once more, cover the right, in through the left. Cover the left, breathe out through the right. You can drop your finger because we're going to breathe in now through both nostrils. And drawing the energy down to the lower abdomen. As you exhale, visualize it going all the way up through the central blue channel. Once more, in through both, out through the central channel. And then a third time, the same thing, in through both, out through the central channel, releasing anything that is still in the mind or the body that is an obstacle. Okay. So, are there any questions on that before we go into doing meditation? Yes, Doris.
I've seen the Dalai Lama demonstrate that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really bad with the right left stuff. So um, I don't know at which point, but he puts his arm up into his arm, under his armpit,
Mm.
and then he switches back. I can't orchestrate it for you because I get really mixed up.
Mm.
Um, do you know the purpose of that?
You know, I haven't seen that. That's the first time I saw that. Mary has an answer to that, though, I think.
Thanks, Amy.
Yeah, thank you, Doris. Thank you, Doris. I actually use that one as well. It's from the 6 Yogas of Naropa.
Mm.
And there is a video on it, and it's really good because something having to do with the energy coming through right under your lymph nodes, it just kind of eliminates distraction. So I could share the link with you if you'd like, Gen Don.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, please put it in the chat box and maybe people can watch it. No, I've always heard this with just the simple visualization. And so I'm familiar with the 6 Yogas of Naropa. I can't say I work with them that much, but I hadn't actually heard that or seen that. Maybe, again, it's just wonderful to know about there's different variations on this. So, okay. So yeah, thanks, Mary.
Thank you.
And thanks, Doris, for the question.
He did that at he did that at Kala Chakra in DC, actually.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, I wasn't there for that. Yeah. Wow. Okay.
It's supposed to be a rare video, so when I saw.
Yeah. Okay. Anyone else? Any questions on this technique? Again, I think most of you have done this before. And again, if you want to, if you know the technique of using under the arms and that, you're welcome to do that. Yes. The question, I don't know your name. I can't tell from the screen.
It's Avishag.
Avishag. Okay.
Yeah, I was just wondering, since I yawn a lot with the energy, so that's affecting does that matter? Part of it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, again, it's hard for me to tell. I've never had that question before, so I don't know whether that would affect it. But I think, again, just do the best that you can. I think with all of these exercises, we're not going to be all doing them exactly the same. And so it's just, again, to work with the breathing, but also to work with the visualizations. You know, the visualizations are an important part of it, obviously. They actually say that these 3 channels, we don't really ever have them open except at these rare moments in our life. This is what highest yoga tantra practice is all about, is kind of opening up these channels so we can experience what's called the clear light mind, and then use that clear light mind in our tantric practice. That's at least how it's taught. Again, there are techniques that go into all of that that are taught that are pretty esoteric, but nonetheless, I mean, we want to work with this visualization and this idea of creating some sort of energy around opening those channels up, so that we can have good success with tantric practice, as well as just in general stabilizing the winds in the body. This whole idea in Tantra that mind rides on winds is incorporated into even our sutra practice of concentration. So to some degree, again, it is a physical exercise we're doing with the breathing, but it's also the sort of mental energy, because we want the mind to go to those places so that the wind follows, in a sense. The mind and the wind always sort of being together. So I wouldn't worry too much with yawns or things like that, that might feel like they're getting in the way of the exercise. And maybe even over time, the yawning will reduce by doing this sort of controlled breathing. And a lot of our breathing meditations that we do, we don't control the breath, right? You know, after we finish this, when we do the meditation in a moment, don't control the breath any longer. You know, just simply let the breath be natural. But there's some times when it's very effective to control the breath, and it can begin to, again, create some different patterns in our breathing that may manifest in other ways in our physical body. So does that help a little bit, Avishag?
Yeah, I mean, it does seem that the yawning happens more and more the more I meditate. The more, I mean, it's to
Oh,
the
really?
point where it's
Oh.
very takes over, and I literally have to pause everything I'm doing because it takes so much, it has so much intensity.
Hmm. I don't really know what to say to that because, again, I have never had that question before, so I'm not sure, yeah, why that would be. Um, I don't know if anyone else has any experience with yawning that they could share in terms of what they found useful. But, well, yeah, sorry, I can't help
Hi.
more than that. Oh, yes, David. Oh, no, David wasn't coming in to say anything, I guess. Okay. So sorry, I can't help you much more with that, Avishag. So, all right, let's go ahead and do it again then. So again,
No, I do have a
oh, you
question.
do have,
I'm
okay, David.
sorry, my camera's broken, so.
Oh, no worries. Okay.
Okay, but in terms of breath retention on the inhalation and on the exhalation, are there any breath retention exercises
Mm,
Buddhism? Because I know in certain Vedic practices, yeah, there's
mm,
a lot of
yeah.
pranayama that retains the breath
Yeah. There
when
is
you're
what's
inhaling and also after you've exhaled.
right. There is an exercise in Buddhism that's called Vas breathing, or sometimes referred to as tummo, sort of creating this heat in the navel area where you sort of breathe in. And I'm going to give very brief instructions, but it's ideal to get instructions from somebody who does this regularly, who makes sure that you don't start messing with Kundalini energy or anything like that, because I know a lot of people can have that potential. But you essentially breathe down, and at the same time you tighten up sort of the diaphragm area, sort of the lower muscles, so that you create a sort of solid foundation for the breath to come down, so that as the diaphragm goes down from the bottom, you're raising things up so that you create this kind of force area, and you hold the breath there for some time and allow the heat to begin to develop in that area, and then you let go and you breathe in again. So the only ways that I've heard it being used so much is on the inhalation. I haven't heard with kind of holding the breath in retaining the breath in after exhalation so much. It's usually with the inhalation, and it's in that Vas breathing. There is a short little write-up on it. It's sometimes called Inner Fire. That's a translation of Tummo. Tummo is a Tibetan term, Tummo. There's a little exercise in that that's in Kathleen MacDonald's book, How to Meditate. I think I mentioned that book previously as a really good one for beginners involved with meditation, but it's also got some good things if you're new to Tibetan Buddhist meditation, or if you just want to review some things. There is one little chapter on working with inner fire, and that's the name of that sort of practice where we do retain the breath to some degree. And I'm sure there are other ones out there that are taught in other tantric traditions and what have you in Tibetan Buddhism that I'm not aware of, but that's the main one that I've heard of, where you do some retaining of the breath. With this exercise, you're really not doing it. You're kind of, again, drawing the breath down, and then when you reach your point where you've inhaled fully, then you exhale. So it's not a matter of holding the breath down there as much with this exercise as it is keeping it fully inhaling and then fully exhaling. Does that help, David?
So yeah, yeah, it does.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's a rhythm. They hold it in,
Mhm.
they breathe, and then they hold the breath for 4 times as long as you breathe, and you exhale and hold it for 2 times as long as you breathe. And yeah, so there's a 1-4-2-2 rhythm.
I see. Okay. Yeah,
But
I've never
anyway,
heard.
thank you. Yeah,
Sure,
thank you.
sure. I've never heard anything that specific in terms of duration of time. What I would encourage you to do is work with, just if you're going to do something like the Vas breathing or that Tomo, to simply do that where it's comfortable, and not, be stuck to some sort of duration of time, because otherwise, again, you might start messing with energies in that area. Again, I'm no expert on all of this. I by no means have that much experience to be able to guide somebody in a lot of this, but if you, again, I'm sure you can find even some YouTube videos on doing this, but I would encourage, again, to try to work with somebody who's got some experience around it. So, all right, let's go ahead and do it then. So again, we're going to do the 9 rounds, 3 in through the right, out through the left, 3 in through the left, out through the right, 3 in through both, out through the central. Okay, so I'll ring the bell to begin this, and I'll just let you do that on your own. And I'm going to mute my mic after the bell finishes ringing so you don't hear my breathing. And then after you finish that again, you can do it again if you'd like, but otherwise just go back to watching the breath, allowing your breathing to take place naturally. So now let's set our motivation for today's class. Just kind of reaffirm this ideal motivation of bodhicitta, this very altruistic mind that is intent upon achieving our own enlightenment so we can lead all sentient beings to achieving their greatest potential as well. And to do this today, let's recall that in last week's class, I spoke to these types of concentration that involve what we direct our mind towards achieving, recognizing that the very first level of concentration that we want to have is this mind we call calm abiding, a mind that will be able to stay single-pointedly focused on whatever object we wish for as long as we wish. And right now we know our concentration is not to that degree, probably, so we can generate an aspiration to achieving that, thinking that, again, this is such an essential part of our path. Without the mind undistracted and very strongly focused, we're not going to be able to change our minds. We're not going to be able to develop our own qualities to the greatest degree. And then secondly, we had the concentration that is determined to develop special insight into the nature of reality, into emptiness. Again, we'll be discussing that topic in more detail in the sixth perfection. But we can see again that we do need to have a very stable mind to do that. While that's a more discursive process of analyzing, looking at the nature of reality, coming to understand how things actually exist, we need a focused mind for that too. Otherwise, our concentration lacking, we won't be able to stay focused on whatever it is we're analyzing. And then lastly, we need to bring these two minds together to have a mind that is directed at the union of calm abiding and special insight. A very powerful mind where we will be able to see into the nature of reality at a degree where it will actually transform ourselves, removing all of our own obscurations, allowing us to eventually attain not just our own liberation, but the state of Buddhahood. So because we have all three of these as meditations, concentrations that we need to direct our mind towards, it's important that we have the overriding motivation or intention, which is to use all of our study of concentration that we're doing in this part of this course so that we can actually achieve the greatest result. We can actually develop our minds to that degree of removing everything that obscures our minds and actualizing all of our positive potentials to the greatest degree. And we're doing this again, not for ourselves, but for other sentient beings. And reaffirming our dedication to them with compassion and love towards them. So again, arrive at this place of bodhicitta, recognizing that all of our study, our practice of concentration, meditation, is done with that overarching motivation of wanting to be of the greatest benefit to all beings, and therefore recognizing that we have to develop ourselves to do that. And just try to single-pointedly focus on that mind of bodhicitta right now for just another couple seconds. Okay, again, welcome to this class and this series on the six perfections. Last week, we introduced concentration, talked a little bit about what is entailed with this. Again, we all have some degree of concentration. It's one of our mental factors that allows us to do various things, engage in certain things. Even you have some level of concentration, hopefully active right now, as you're looking at the screen and taking in my words and, what have you, everything that we've done so far today. So we need concentration. But here we're talking about a development, a cultivation of this factor of concentration that goes to this degree of being single-pointedly focused for much longer durations of time. So a lot of what we're going to be talking about in this course is developing this various level of meditative stabilization or concentration that we call calm abiding. And that'll be a little bit of what we go into today. But yes, the last week's class, we spent a bit of time talking about various divisions or types of concentration. But as I mentioned in the meditation today, we do need concentration in order to achieve any great realizations on the path to change our minds and so on. So everything we do in terms of the bit of meditation we did this morning, with the 9-round breathing meditation, all of these things are sort of putting drops in the bucket, and eventually the bucket will fill. Eventually we will get to a place where we do have much better concentration than we currently possess. Nonetheless, I will point out some things today in terms of how it is best to develop our concentration, what factors will contribute to it to a greater degree, so that we have kind of everything lined up to complement this practice of concentration or meditation. So let me go ahead and get back to the slides so that we can catch up to where we were at. Again, this perfection is the 5th perfection. It is after the first 4 that we studied previously that are, again, in terms of how this is set out, the easier ones first and then the more difficult ones later. So we are in the latter part of the 6 perfections where we are dealing with certainly those that are much more difficult to cultivate. Generosity being allowing others to partake of what resources we have, giving money to them, time to them, attention to them is very easy compared to maintaining good morality, compared to maintaining a mind that's undisturbed and a patient attitude towards whoever harms us or whatever sufferings we experience. And then even our joyous effort, our enthusiasm for our practice that needs to be there as a factor to help us to engage in the latter perfections, concentration and wisdom. But nonetheless, is very hard to maintain in our lives, to have that unbridled enthusiasm for engaging in spiritual practice. And we see again how much that is needed, particularly with regard to concentration. And that's going to come up a little bit later as one of the antidotes to our first obstacle that we experience with regard to our practice of meditation, which is laziness. So perfection of concentration. Again, just to review what just 1 or 2 slides from last week, concentration, Geshe Loden says, is a mental factor. Again, a factor in our minds. You have sort of the main mind in which that is happening, which is our mental consciousness. And then you have the mental factor there that is capable of abiding one-pointedly on an object of virtue without distraction. So again, we're fine-tuning what we mean by concentration, although it is present with even to some degree with our sense consciousnesses or with our day-to-day activities. We're talking about here something we develop with our mental consciousness, with that element of our mind where we are looking at an object of virtue. Or it doesn't always have to be an object of virtue, but certainly this is the ideal use of this, is to develop our minds by changing the quality of our minds into more virtuous states. So we want that without distraction. Again, we're going to talk about distraction today and some of the antidotes to that. But when concentration is motivated by bodhicitta, it becomes a perfection of concentration. So with all of these, we have them as just a basic practice, but when we unite them with that motivation that we just meditated on, bodhicitta, it then becomes part of what we call the perfection of concentration, which isn't actually completely perfected until we attain Buddhahood, but nonetheless, it's a practice and it moves in that direction. Again, we looked at this last week, the 3 divisions. We divide it by in terms of its nature, whether it is mundane or worldly meditation, or supramundane, meaning that it is united with a deeper wisdom that sees into the nature of reality, that special insight. Then we have the direction, as I mentioned in the motivation today. We can be directed towards simply attaining calm abiding, attaining special insight, or attaining the union of these 2. And then we have its function, again, different functions that it performs in terms of causing us to have more bliss, peacefulness in our minds, to benefit other sentient beings, and so on. So again, we have different functions that concentration can play. So I'm going to go into today the first topic, which again is also on your handout, just in very brief. There's just the listing of these things, no commentary at all, but the listing of what are called the 6 essential causes. Now, again, when we go through this, I first want to precede this with a little bit of advice from Lama Zopa Rinpoche about retreat. And that's because, as we're going to see, there's going to be another little quote that I share from Alan Wallace. While we can do a lot with concentration and meditation in our daily life, all of us with probably fairly busy lives, some of us less busy than others, but nonetheless, all of us having maybe a limited amount of time to actually focus on developing our meditative skills. And so in that way, because we have a limited time in our daily life, it is good to plan to do some form of retreat. And again, and for most of you, you've done some of this before, but it's useful to begin to explore that possibility if you haven't. You might initially do group retreat, where you are with other practitioners engaging in a sort of calm abiding shamatha retreat, where you're actually trying to develop your concentration to a greater degree. But over time, it's also good to explore doing individual retreat, where you actually set aside a time, be it a week, a month, 2 months, 3 months, however long you can, and you go on retreat and you work to fine tune your meditation. And you can complement it with other practices, but nonetheless, retreat is really the best environment in which to allow this to go much deeper. We know that in our daily lives, we just get caught up in too many things, right? And that's even happens with most of us, I'm sure, when we do our morning meditation or whenever you do it. Again, it is ideal, they say, to do it in the morning, but nonetheless, find what works for you in terms of your schedule. But when you have your meditation and you get the mind into a fairly stable, calm place, and then you get up off your meditation cushion and then you're getting on the computer and you're answering emails and you're doing this and you're doing that. And maybe our lives aren't as busy now as they were, before the pandemic, but nonetheless, it's very easy for the mind to get distracted again. This is the difficulty of doing meditative practice while we are out and about in the world. If we go into retreat, then we have a little more control over that, right? We shouldn't be taking our devices with us, should be sort of shutting off all of that sort of stuff. We should be mostly focused on the practice we are there to do. And if we need to take a walk or do something, we do it in a very, kind of mindful way so that we're not getting caught up in all sorts of things. But try to shut off all of that so that we can actually create an ideal space. So Rinpoche, in his commentary in the book, The Six Perfections, where he goes into each of these six paramitas or perfections, he talks about retreat. And he says, without spending time in retreat, the mind is like muddy water. It's a good example for it, right? Good analogy. But within a retreat, being alone and without distractions, the mind can actually become like a calm, crystal clear lake. There is the clarity you need to help see yourself more clearly, to see your own Buddha nature, and of course, to work with whatever practices that you want to do within the space of retreat. Then he goes on to say, to realize the ultimate nature of things, of course, this wisdom that we're going to look at next, the final perfection, their emptiness, you need a deep understanding conjoined with a fully concentrated mind. Again, the union of calm abiding and special insight that I referred to earlier. There is no other way to be free from samsara, nor to attain enlightenment. Again, these two different goals, the goal of liberation from samsara, the goal of complete enlightenment, where we attain the state of Buddhahood and can help others to do that same work. So Rinpoche says to do that outside of retreat is almost impossible. And again, from my own experience with my meditation, I see how difficult it is to maintain a concentrated mind, off the cushion. Without a retreat environment, it's very, very difficult. He says then you have to understand the meaning of retreat. It's not just about being silent and not eating, as much as we normally do. He means you don't go on retreat and completely fast, but, not seeing people and things like that. It's retreating away from those negative emotional thoughts of daily life. That's the fundamental retreat. That's the real retreat. And this is something to keep in mind. And as we're going to see with these six essential causes, some of them are lessening the effects of these negative emotional thoughts to the degree that we can, so that when we go into retreat, they aren't following us. We'll be able to leave them behind when we go off to solitude. Then he says also, you must plan every morning to retreat away from ignorance, attachment, and self-cherishing by practicing their opposites, wisdom, renunciation, and bodhicitta, the three principal aspects of the path. So he's highlighting these three: the ignorance that we have that is at the root of all of our problems, the attachment, especially to the worldly concerns that we have in our lives that we need to renounce, and then the self-cherishing, the tendency to be very self-centered in our focus, by developing the mind that cherishes others, of bodhicitta. These are, again, wisdom, renunciation, and bodhicitta are the three principal aspects of the path that we want to be training in our daily life, as well as even in our meditation retreat. So knowing what retreat means, he says, is very important. You, whoop, I must have missed a word here. Don't think it's just about fasting, staying in silence, and hiding the body in a room. While the mind is in retreat, doing those things is also good. Otherwise, with just those things alone, it becomes a prison. You know, people go a little bit crazy if they don't have the force of mind to be able to use those sorts of techniques of fasting to some degree, you know, staying in silence, hiding ourselves away, going into solitude. You know, in prisons, that's how they uh, punish people, is by putting them into solitude. Of course, they're not really ideal environments. I'm not making light of that in any way, but these are things that, again, if you don't have the right strength of mind behind it, the right lessening of your own negative states, then it's going to be more like a prison rather than retreat. He says this is similar to living in a monastery or living in ordination without renunciation. Clinging to worldly pleasures, there's no enjoyment. The discipline seems like torture, and keeping the vows becomes like a prison in the mind. But when the mind is guarded from attachment, living in the vows becomes so enjoyable. So again, these are the things that we have to work on even before going into retreat, as we're going to see in terms of these 6 essential causes. This is what I wanted to share from Alan Wallace, because I think it is important that, you know, we hear from Western practitioners too. I mean, not just, you know, Rinpoche and these great masters of Tibet and what have you. Alan Wallace, as many of you know, has done a lot of work around shamatha, and he has a Center for Contemplative Research in Santa Barbara, run through the University of California, Santa Barbara, and has done extensive retreats with so many people, working with trying to see the effects of the proper environment and people coming together and practicing meditation of shamatha together. So he's got some knowledge. He's definitely a great practitioner in that regard. He says, for most people, achieving stage 3 of the 9 mental stages prior to developing calm abiding, we're going to look at these at the tail end of this section on the perfection of concentration, will require a greater commitment than an hour or two spent each day in meditation in the midst of an active life. You know, I mentioned this to you just a short while ago, but it's good to get that affirmation from Alan Wallace that that's his experience too, is that if we only spend an hour or two each day in meditation, that's great. I mean, don't discount that. That's important, but we need a greater commitment to get beyond the initial stages of calming our minds, of developing this deep concentration. He goes on to say the more advanced stages of attentional development are accessible to people who dedicate themselves to weeks or months of rigorous practice in a conducive environment. Progress beyond the 4th attentional stage of, again, these 9 stages requires a vocational commitment to this training, which may involve full-time practice for months or years at a stretch. So I think this is important. I'm not, you know, in any way trying to discourage you by sharing this information with you. It's to actually encourage you to, one, do the practice that you do every day. If you do your hour, 2 hours, less than that, you know, 20 minutes, whatever it is that you can do. It is important that you have some practice of meditative concentration every day. It's not, again, the most important thing, but it is a pretty important one, because without that, our analytical meditation, where we go in and investigate things, is going to be very weak. So we want to spend some portion of our meditation practice doing that. And we're going to talk about, again, how to make that work for us individually in terms of what objects to choose and the things to set up. And even I thought I would talk a little bit more about posture today, since we didn't get a chance to talk about that so much last week. But you know, this is an important part of our practice. So that's the very first thing to emphasize, is that without your continuity of having done that every day, it's going to be very hard to even think about going into retreat and making it successful. But then secondly, try to think about when you might be able to create the time and space to do that. Now, don't think, oh, well then, you know, I need to go do a much longer retreat to make a deeper commitment to this. Well, don't think that that's the best thing to start with. It's always better to start in smaller increments. So even with our meditation, as I'm going to talk about a little bit later in terms of timing a meditation, start with small increments of time that you're spending meditating on the breath or whatever object you're working with, and then increase it over time. It's the same with retreat. Don't start off with a 3-month retreat. You know, a 3-month retreat is going to be too difficult for you if you've never done retreat before. So start off with a weekend retreat, you know, a little calm abiding retreat that a center is sponsoring or whatever. And again, they might be doing it even online. You try to create an environment that'll support doing that type of practice together. Then over time, maybe think about doing a week, doing 2 weeks, doing a month, doing longer than that. But to begin to think about that as real possibilities in your life. I know many of us have very busy lives, but if we never create the time for this, we're never going to develop this skill. As was pointed out by Alan Wallace and even by Rinpoche, pretty close to impossible to develop these deeper levels of concentration without retreat, without spending some time sort of set apart from the world and working on this practice. Of course, in an ideal environment, which is what we're going to look at next, is kind of what all supports your own individual ability to attain that state. So Geshe Loden points out that without the right conditions, it will take a long time to gain the realization of calm abiding. As Atisha said in the text that became the basis for these stages of the path teachings, Lamrim teachings, the lamp on the path to enlightenment, he said, if the conditions for calm abiding are deficient, though meditating with great effort, even for 1,000 years, you will not achieve concentration. So this again is Lama Atisha essentially saying that even if you put great effort into it, if the conditions aren't correct, if you haven't set up these essential causes as a support for your development of concentration, it will be very difficult, if not impossible, even for 1,000 years, he says. Of course, who lives 1,000 years? Not me, I don't think. So let's look at each of these. And the very first one has a number of subpoints to it. Again, you also have these on the handout that is available at the Dropbox page for this course. It says, dwelling in a favorable environment, having the 5 conditions. We have to be in the right physical space. We're not meditating with our bodies and with kind of that element of us, but we need an external environment that supports the health of our bodies, the ability to use our bodies well, to have the mental qualities then that we need to develop concentration. So first, a place where necessities such as food, water, and clothing are easily obtained. So again, you don't want to be someplace where the water is bad, where the food is going to be deficient. You won't be eating maybe quite as much. It is said to be much better for the mind to not eat so much because it makes the mind and the body very heavy by eating a lot of food. But you want food that is nutritious, that is easy to digest, that is able to support you in maintaining a strong body as well as a strong mind. And clothing, making sure that you have everything that you need to keep you comfortable during the various changes of the seasons, because if you're there for a much longer period of time, that may be an element. A wholesome and safe place, free from danger and harmful interferences. Obviously, if we have that fear of danger all the time, that's not going to be very conducive to the mind settling into a deeper concentration. So harmful interferences, again, if you have a lot of animals even in the area, wild animals, or I know it was kind of interesting, Alan Wallace, I think it was, pointed this out, or maybe it was Alex Berzin, how you have this vision of like going off to India or Nepal or something and having this ideal experience of being in, the place where all the great meditators have gone. But don't think that they're always going to necessarily be supportive in terms of the amount of noise and commotion going on, and potentially even, animals at night or what have you. And I recall when I was in Tibet, 1994, my only trip into Tibet, I went because His Holiness had always said, or was saying it certainly at that time, I don't know if he's still saying it, but he said, if you want to see it sooner than later, because it's only going to get worse. And people I've talked to, who've been there since then do say that it has gotten worse. But what's interesting, when I was in Tibet, I don't know if it happens as much in Nepal, is that that's when the dogs are actually up all night. They sleep all during the day, and then they're up at night barking at each other. And so it's very hard to sleep in Tibet. So, these things, again, you just have to be kind of forewarned that you're not always going to have ideal conditions, but you have to learn to work with kind of trying to create them as best as you can. So places where there's not a lot of, again, noise, danger from animals, what have you, things like this, or danger from people that would interrupt the peace that you have there. A healthy location where you will not be subject to dampness and other conditions that can cause illness. There are certainly some places where you could be where your own physical body may not take so well to that. So you have to maybe scout around and try to find places. This is why it is sometimes good to go on shorter retreats in some locations. A lot of people go up to Crestone, Colorado, as an example, of places where people are building many of their retreat cabins and what have you, and they seem to find good conditions up there. But I'm not plugging Crestone, Colorado. It might not work for a lot of people, but if you are going to find a place locally, even in New Mexico, Santa Fe area, well, then try to check it out to see what the conditions are like, and go there at different times of the year, so you get a different idea of what it would be like, if you were there for a longer duration. The fourth one, a place with helpful and conducive companions at hand. As I said earlier, it might be ideal to start this type of retreat practice with groups, other people who are there to do the same thing. Even though you might actually meditate on your own part of the time, and then some of the time you'll be together in a common meeting space. It would be useful to have that kind of support. Certainly you don't want to go to a place where no one's around. That could be helpful to you if you do have any issues or problems with your meditation, need any advice. If you can go on retreat with a qualified master, there's somebody who's done this deeper work, who has traveled the path before and knows what sorts of obstacles or things might come up, that's really ideal. But at least to have it be other people who are conducive to what you're doing. The fifth element in terms of a favorable environment is what they say is a location well situated for yogic practice, free from commotion and noise. So again, a lot of these places where gurus, holy beings have meditated before are said to be ideal. Certainly, some people do find, for example, and I've heard this from a number of people, and I found this to be my experience as well. I haven't done extensive retreat at any of these places, but I do feel the difference when I go to some place like Vajrapani Institute in California. It's in Boulder Creek. It is one of the first centers of the FPMT, and it's very much blessed by Lama Yeshe having helped to develop that. He's the founder of our organization. His remains are also there. There's a stupa of Lama Yeshe there. There's all this Lama Yeshe energy there, and most people do find when they go to those places where great masters have meditated, sort of blessed the place, that they have much greater success with their meditation. If you try to do it at just a place that's a secular place or whatever, you might be hit or miss. You might find some places that are more conducive than others, but you're not going to these great places that people have blessed. Now, again, there's expense involved in doing some of this. It's another element of it that isn't sort of on the list when we often talk about retreat and developing meditation. But unless you build your own retreat cabin, which of course that's going to cost money too, but at least you'll have your own place where you can go to all the time. To go to these places and to spend some time there does cost some money generally, because they provide your meals, and of course you're taking a space there that they have built and provided and what have you. So know that there might be some budgeting you need to do in regard to this as well. But it is ideal if you can go to these places where your own gurus have been, lamas have been, where they've done that type of practice, so that you have that enrichment, that quality that will actually help you to make greater progress. Those are the things in regard to the environment. Again, there might be other things that might be more specific to you and your own situation regarding your health, your well-being, that you feel you need to have in order to develop a good, favorable environment. Everything else, the other ones that are on the list of these 6 essentials, are more about things to some degree that we can do before we go into retreat, but certainly while we are in retreat, we also need to emphasize these. Number 2, having few wants, refers to not always having a mind that's thinking about what you don't have, what you don't possess. Of course, if this is already something that plagues you in your daily life, you're always thinking about, oh, getting this and obtaining that and having this. Well, then when you sit down in a retreat environment, you're going to still have that mind. That's why, again, I emphasize these as something you can do something about before you go into retreat. Try to diminish the amount of wanting and desiring things that you don't have, and develop the third one here, being content with what you do have. Contentment is a wonderful treasure. Nagarjuna says it's the most amazing treasure because no one can ever take it away from you. Unlike wealth and possessions, who people can steal them. No one can take away your contentment, being content with what you have means, to some degree, living with a simple life. It doesn't necessarily involve complete austerities, but it means that you're going to not have this accumulation mind, in driving you to think that there's something better or something else that you would want. You're going to be simply content with what you do have, the possessions you have, and so on. Even in retreat, of course, this can mean being content with the food that one is given, not always thinking about, oh, it would be so nice to be eating at, some place that you normally go to and having their food and whatever. Contentment is a very powerful mind that keeps the mind much more even keeled. Maintaining pure morality. This is the one that I can't emphasize enough. If you recall from your own Lam Rim studies, when we got to the middle scope, we're of course in the great scope where we work with bodhicitta and the practices of a bodhisattva. But in the middle scope, when they talk about how do you achieve your own liberation, there are 3 higher trainings, and these are set up in terms of a hierarchy. You do need a foundation of good morality. Why is that? Because once I always point out to people, think about a time when you've tried to meditate, when you just had a bad argument with somebody in the past day or so, that's still on your mind. You sit down to meditate and you're trying to focus, and all that keeps coming up is your justification of why you said what you did, and you're, wanting them to be wrong and pointing out their faults to them and what you should say to them the next time you meet them, and what you're doing all this processing because you've done something that isn't so wholesome, so good. If we live our lives with constantly going to places of non-virtuous action through our bodies, our speech, our minds, then it's going to be very hard for the mind to settle. So the very first higher training that you need to develop some stability in before you go on to develop concentration is living a moral life, living a life that's not so caught up in, hurting others, harming others, as well as harming ourselves through mental patterns and, so on, behavioral patterns that cause us to suffer. Then on the basis of that is the training in concentration. And without the training in concentration, what we're talking about here, you won't be able to develop the training in wisdom. So we see that these are sort of the core elements of all the Buddha's teachings. Training in morality, concentration, wisdom. In fact, they divide all the Buddha's teachings into what are called the 3 baskets. The basket of the Vinaya teachings, which are the teachings in ethical discipline or morality, and then the teachings in Sutra, which are the concentration teachings, and the teachings that are the basket of Abhidharma, which are the knowledge, the wisdom teachings. So those are the essence of all the Buddhist path in the path leading to one's own liberation, but they even encompass to some degree what we talk about in the Mahayana in terms of our development of bodhicitta and attaining enlightenment. We could still say that everything we do is involved in one of those 3 practices. Our practice of generosity could be included to some degree in our morality, our desire to not harm but to help others. And then we could include our practice of patience within morality as well, too, right? To try to not get angry and upset at those around us and do things that would harm them. So morality, concentration, and wisdom are really key. If you haven't lived a good sort of life of abiding by the Buddhist precepts around living your life in a moral way, it's very hard to develop concentration. And that's kind of the point of that one. Let me go back to the list. We've got 2 more. Completely giving up the demands of society. Once more, as I pointed out, it's not good to take all your devices and your work and your, finances and whatever on retreat with you. Try to leave all those behind. Find somebody who can pay your bills for you or put them on auto pay or do whatever. Take care of your things, your pets, your whatever, so that you don't have to be involved in the normal demands of society. Again, now, how does that apply to our daily life now? Well, we can give up maybe some of the extraneous demands of society we have right now. Is it possible to simplify your life again so that you're not dealing with so many things that pull you in so many different directions? As I said, that's one of the problems with our daily concentration is we get off our cushion and then we're caught up in it again, and it's very hard for the mind to stay focused. Then this last one, completely abandoning thoughts of desire is how it is said, but know that this could include other conceptual thoughts that we entertain, kind of ways of having inappropriate mental attention to things. And to that end, I want to share what Alan Wallace says about this. He calls this 6th one, dispensing with compulsive thoughts. Many of us let compulsive thoughts dominate our minds. These won't stop overnight, but as we engage in shamatha practice, calm abiding, both during and between sessions, it is important to observe the mind's activities and restrain it when it falls into thought patterns that aggravate mental disturbances. So we have to be kind of good babysitters of our own minds, right? We have to kind of tend to them so that these compulsive patterns don't take over. And oftentimes, again, we see how those are problematic when we sit on our cushion. If we have a tendency to worry or to have a lot of thoughts of desire or whatever, that those things become problems for us. They keep the mind from settling. So the slide that I was going to stay on there and share, Pabanka Rinpoche says that if you get all of these 6 conditions in place, and of course you've done your work ahead of time and you've studied calm abiding well, and you have a good idea of what it is you want to do, and you enter into retreat, in his estimation, it's about 6 months that you need to develop calm abiding, which is pretty amazing, when you think about it. What were we doing these, months that we were dealing with the pandemic and what have you? Maybe we could have achieved calm abiding while we were staying at home or something, if we had the right environment and were able to manipulate things to do that. But 6 months is really not that long a period of time. Now, Alan Wallace, again, did seem to say dedicating months or even years. There are probably some of us that it might take longer. But once more, that depends to some degree on what you come into retreat with. If you've already established a pretty firm practice and you're meditating a couple of hours every day, you're going to probably have a much better success than if you try to go into retreat and all you've done is 15, 20 minutes a day. Because we are talking about extending the duration of time we spend in practice. So let's take our little break here. And when we return, what we're going to do is talk a little bit too about posture and meditation objects, and then hopefully get on to talking about these obstacles that we have that we need to be attentive to. Even though we might not right now be in the environment where we're going to face even some of these obstacles, we do have some of them that are definitely a part of what keeps us from developing concentration. So let's take, it's about 11:03. Let's just go to 11:15. I think that's fine because it's going to turn to 11:04 at any moment now, I'm sure. So we'll reconvene at 11:15 and I'll ring the bell here so that you'll hear that if you have wandered away from your device. So, okay. Okay, good. Hope you had a nice little break. There were 2 questions that came into the chat box while we were on break, so I wanted to address those before we go on to new topics. One was in terms of when we go on retreat, I was mentioning about leaving the pets behind, and there was a question about whether it might be good to bring pets sometimes because they get good imprints by being around the Dharma, being around people who are practicing, and if you're doing other practices where you're reciting mantra or whatever, I mean, it is always good to have pets receive those sorts of imprints from those things. I guess on shorter retreats, it may not be as much of an issue. And I even have done at least one retreat in someone's home where I was caring for their pets. I was sort of pet sitting while I was retreating, which is nice. You can, feed them and do whatever. But I would think that in longer retreat, it might become a bit problematic because the amount of attention they require, even if they're very well-behaved animals and they don't really require too much, they are something that you are tending to that may be, again, another thing that could potentially distract. But I don't know if there's absolute guidelines on it, but I would say definitely if you're going to do longer retreat, best if you can leave the pets behind and just focus on what you're there to do and not have extraneous things pulling you away from your meditation and what have you. Because even, I mean, I find I don't have a dog any longer, but I've got cats, and I find myself talking to my cats frequently and getting quite involved in their lives. So I think it's better if we don't have that, to kind of be a distraction for us. But I would say again, each of your own situations might be very different, but certainly longer retreat, I think it's best to not have that involved. The other question was just to distinguish between these 2 terms that we do see frequently. I've been using this word shamatha a lot. Shamatha is the term that applies specifically to calm abiding. Calm abiding being a form of samadhi. Samadhi is the other word that to distinguish from shamatha. Samadhi means meditative stabilization or concentration. It is the bigger bucket kind of, if you will. Oftentimes in Buddhist debate, they use this idea of sort of sets and how things are related to each other. In terms of these two, it's three possibilities. There's the possibility of something that's neither of those, which would be like a totally distracted mind. There is the something that is one but not the other. So that would be, it's a stabilization, but it's not calm abiding. So for example, something that is a samadhi that's not shamatha is the factor of concentration that we have present before we've developed our calm abiding mind. Then we have calm abiding, which is a mind that is within the category of the larger category of samadhi or meditative stabilization, but it's a specific instance of it when we are able to abide single pointedly on an object as long as we wish. Know that within calm abiding, there are even further divisions because you take that basis of calm abiding and you can use it as a platform for developing even more refined levels of concentration. So in essence, we have that smaller bucket that is calm abiding or shamatha within the larger thing that is samadhi or meditative stabilization. And again, uh, we all have that factor to some degree. We just don't have it developed to the degree that calm abiding is. So hopefully that's clear then about what we mean by these terms that do get thrown around a lot in the Sanskrit. All right, let's go on then. As I was saying, if we have all of these essential causes in place, all these conditions in place, you know, in Buddhism, we emphasize that so much, causes and conditions. Then, as Babankar Rinpoche says, it'll take no more than 6 months to achieve what he called their mental quiescence. Again, this is another term for calm abiding. The Tibetan is shine, shi meaning peace, and ne meaning abide. So peaceful abiding, quietly abiding, whatever. This mental quiescence can develop rather quickly if we have everything in place. You know, and as it says there, and make effort in your practice. You can't just go out to a retreat environment where everything is fine, but not actually do the practice. You know, you actually have to engage in pretty dedicated practice. Then I want to point out a few things before we get into these other topics. And this is something that came up in the Light of the Path retreats with Lama Zopa Rinpoche in 2017, the last ones that were held. And I was really, I remember hearing this in the teaching, and I found the teachings, I'm inserting a few words to make the flow of the English a little bit better. When Rinpoche teaches, he often, you have to fill in the gap to some degree. And it says, I think many people want to try Shine, calm abiding, but you don't think of collecting merits. You don't think much about that. I don't know, maybe in particular Western people, he says, need to collect merit so much. He really emphasized this, is that we have to have kind of this storehouse of merit. What do we mean by merit? Merit is all the virtuous actions we've engaged in, especially those where we've accumulated positive potential through certain practices, sometimes what are often called the preliminary practices, the ngondro, the things that help you to create that store of merit. We gain merit anytime we do virtuous practice, but we need quite a bit in the tank, it seems, to get to this level of meditative stabilization that we call calm abiding, shamatha. Meditate, 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 then it doesn't happen. You try, maybe sometimes degenerate, become crazy, become dull. Dullness, you understand dullness? Of course, I understand dullness. I have that quality in my mind a lot. You don't think much about collecting merit, he says. This is something that so easily happens. But you don't collect that merit. It doesn't happen. Instead of that, you have some danger. So you need to collect much merit, karma, to achieve Shine. To get to this level of calm abiding, we can't just think that we don't do anything and then suddenly it's going to happen for us. You need that store of energy. Then he goes on to say, even the guru is important for Shine. What kind of guru? Your merit. All the answer is your merit. That is why we need to pray in all lifetimes to meet a perfectly qualified guru all the time, not just a guru without separation, enjoy the holy dharma, actualize the path and the bhumis, the grounds, and the state of Vajradhara. You have to make all these prayers that kind of keep you in the good graces of those beings that can help you on your path, that can provide the instruction and the support, the inspiration that you need. So he says, this is why I mentioned to make the prayer to meet Mahayana teachings, to first obtain perfect human rebirth, then meet the Mahayana teachings, then meet perfectly qualified guru, revealing the unmistaken path to enlightenment. I mention that precisely like that. These are the things that we need to do to kind of create some additional conditions that are so essential to achieving calm abiding. They weren't on the list of the 6, but they are kind of behind the scenes, developing merit and having a good relationship, a healthy relationship with the guru, so that you can, again, receive everything that you need to be able to accomplish that task. He says, then you achieve enlightenment, have that aspiration to achieve enlightenment by pleasing most the holy mind. That is all importance, not blah, 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 not just him saying blah, 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 but all importance, important teachings to pay attention to. Not only your merit for Shine, but also the guru. You understand? So this is how Rinpoche often talks, right? So let's go on then to talk a little bit about posture, physical posture for meditation. 7 points are generally given for the ideal posture, but most people will need to modify those for their own situation. I talked about this a little bit last week. I think it was Larry who had a question about, if in this life can't get into the full lotus posture or has difficulty, say you have difficulty with your back and it's very hard to sit up straight. And, it doesn't mean that you can't attain these states, as far as I can tell. It just means that you're going to have, maybe again, some adjustments that need to be made and maybe some delays in obtaining these greater states of concentration. But I think we all have to work with our bodies in terms of how they are and what sort of problems or difficulties we have. Geshe Loden in his book does say that it's ideal to use the 7-point posture because you're going to have to be sitting in meditation for longer periods of time. So you need something that's going to be quite comfortable for you, meaning that it's not going to be something that, you have to get out of that posture pretty quickly because you just can't maintain it. So this is, again, not to say that the 7-point posture is that easy for most of us to maintain. If you're actually able to get into it with everything present, then perhaps it is. But a lot of us can't even get into the 7-point posture because the very first element of the posture does involve the legs. So I'm going to share those really quickly, and I'll have this handout. I will pass it along to Mary, and she'll get it out at the Dropbox. This is from our beginning course in meditation, Meditation 101. The 7-point meditation posture. In regard to the legs, if possible, sit with your legs crossed in the Vajra or full lotus position. Again, hard for some of us, but in that position, each foot is placed sole upward on the thigh of the opposite leg. Most of us know what that looks like, even if we can't attain it. This position is difficult to achieve, but one can train the body to do so over time, and this position gives the best support to the body and mind. However, it is not essential. An alternate position is the half lotus position, where one foot is on the floor under the opposite leg and the other on top of the opposite thigh. I find that really challenging too, and you feel a little bit crooked with that. I find it just doesn't feel quite balanced. A third alternative is simply sitting in the cross-legged posture with both feet resting on the floor under the opposite thighs. Well, the problem with that, the cross-legged posture, puts a lot of pressure on those points of contact, right? Where the legs are crossed. So I don't find that to be as useful as what's called the Burmese posture, which isn't even on that sheet. The Burmese posture, you have the legs kind of parallel, right? If you can manage to open up your hips wide enough and raise up your buttocks so that you've got a good ability to open the hips, you can actually have the legs where the lower parts of the legs are parallel, right next to each other. There's very few points of contact. You might have your feet a little bit underneath your knees, but not so much if you can really spread out your hips quite a bit. And then that way, you don't have those places that become sore over time when you're sitting. Now, you do have to sometimes change this, but it's very easy to change. You just kind of lift up your leg briefly and you can move it back and forth, whichever leg is forward. The good thing about this too is that it does allow your knees to be resting on the cushion. They say that, of course, with the cross-legged posture, your knees are often up in the air. This can cause a lot of knee pain over time. And if you can put cushions under those, that will aid in that. But nonetheless, it's best if the knees can be flat. I'm using my hands here. I hope that's working for people to kind of think about these being legs. But you want to have your knees flat on the ground as much as possible. So you form kind of a tripod, the two knees and the buttocks forming a triangle. Now, again, you're going to raise up the buttocks to some degree, especially if you're doing these types of postures, the legs crossed. If you have the full lotus posture, they say you don't need to have the cushion quite as high. Again, I'm not able to attain that myself, so I can't really speak to that. But let's read what the rest of this is in terms of this. And not all of these 7 elements have so much writing on them. We'll go through the rest of them rather quickly. Sitting on a firm cushion that raises the buttocks higher than the knees can help you greatly to keep your spine straight. It can also help you to sit for longer periods of time without having your feet and legs fall asleep or get uncomfortable pins and needles. If sitting on a cushion on the floor is not possible, one can use a low meditation bench. They use these often in the Zen tradition, right? A little bench that you kind of tuck your feet underneath and you're kneeling as if you were kneeling in church or something. And then you just use the bench as your cushion under your buttocks that kind of keep you in that position. It is also perfectly acceptable to meditate while sitting on a chair. The most important thing is to find a suitable position in which you are able to be comfortable. It's also possible to meditate lying on the ground in the corpse position as they have in yoga, right? You know, where you're just lying on the ground, arms splayed just a little bit. But you have to be a little careful with that, because when you lie down, there'll be a tendency for the mind to become more tired, kind of approach sleepiness. So arms. Hold your hands loosely in your lap, the right hand resting in the palm of your left, palms upward, thumbs lightly touching, forming the shape of a teardrop or a flame. Your hands should be resting about 2 to 3 inches below the navel. Shoulders and arms should be relaxed. Arms should be slightly akimbo, leaving a bit of space between your arms and your body to allow air to circulate. And again, that keeps sleepiness from happening. So again, the position with the hands, if I could demonstrate those, maybe I'll point the camera down here a little bit, is that you've got the right on the left, and then just resting gently, the thumbs touching very gently. You don't press them together or anything. You can see how it's forming kind of a teardrop or a flame. And this would be resting in your lap. Some people, I think some meditation teachers teach you holding it aloft, like, you know, outside around the area of the navel. But again, that puts more stress and tension on the body, and you want the body to be somewhat relaxed. So just allow it to rest naturally in your lap. And if this is too uncomfortable, you can certainly put the hands palms down or palms up on either knee. The arms being slightly akimbo means, again, you got some space between the arms and the body, so you don't have too much heat being generated in the body. That can be useful, kind of the air flowing. Now, some people wear a meditation shawl when they meditate, especially in the winter. It's kind of nice, you know, when you got cold air around you, if your home isn't so warm, if you don't have a fire blazing or something, and you just, you know, can still kind of keep a little bit of space between the arms and the body, even in that wearing a shawl, some sort of cover or blanket. The back is perhaps the most important, as it says here. It should be straight, held relaxed and lightly upright, as if the vertebrae were a stack of blocks effortlessly resting in a pile. This helps your energy to flow freely and contributes greatly to the clarity and alertness of your mind in meditation. The position of your legs can contribute greatly to how easy it is to maintain a straight back. Often the higher the cushion is under your buttocks and the lower your knees are, the easier it is to keep a straight back. But experiment to see what works for you. I think I mentioned this last week, is that there's a book by Will Johnson called The Posture of Meditation. That it's not an essential book to have because it's very short, and it's usually used just to help you get into right posture, but you can refer to it occasionally to modify your posture. But it kind of covers things in terms of main elements of posture and how to work with them. So know that that is useful as well. To work with the back is to have you know, some additional guidance from people who've explored it, who kind of have a good feeling for the body and how to work with the body. Your eyes. In the beginning, it's often easier to concentrate with your eyes fully closed, admittedly, right? Because we get too distracted. This is totally fine, but as you gain some experience with meditation, it's recommended that you learn to leave your eyes slightly open, to admit a little light, and that you direct your gaze downwards, not really focusing on anything in particular. You have what I call a soft focus to the eyes. You're not staring intently at one little, you know, piece of the carpet or whatever. You're looking, you know, in a very general way with the eyes in that soft focus. Closing the eyes completely may create a tendency towards sluggishness, sleep, or daydreaming, all of which are obstacles to clear meditations. The other thing is, Holiness points out in one of his books is that when we meditate with the eyes closed, it also can become a hindrance to some degree when you begin to do visualization and tantric practices. It's ideal if you can have the eyes slightly open so that you can visualize all the time whenever you need to, because in tantric practice, you're ideally trying to maintain this pure view everywhere that you go and what you're doing, So anyway, just know that there's some benefits to having the eyes open in terms of our visualization as well. Let's go on to the last three elements. The jaw and the mouth. Your jaw and mouth should be relaxed with your teeth just slightly apart. You don't want your teeth clenched. Lips slightly touching. So again, it's good just to have that relaxation to the mouth. Now, I know some people might have problems breathing through the nose, and you might need to breathe through the mouth due to, again, your own physical makeup. But it's best if you can meditate with breathing through the nose. And again, if you do have to breathe through the mouth, just try to keep the mouth as relaxed as you can and not so wide open. The tongue should rest lightly on your upper palate, with the tip of the tongue lightly touching the back of the upper teeth. This reduces the flow of saliva and the need to swallow. It also does create a bit of an energetic connection, but these automatic bodily actions can be hindrances, swallowing and so on, to deepening your concentration, as they can become, distractions to your focus and what you're doing. And then your head should be just slightly inclined forward so that your gaze is directed naturally toward the floor in front of you. And if your chin is held too high, you may have problems with mental wandering, distraction. And if you drop your head too far forward, this can bring mental dullness or sleepiness. So again, find what works for you without creating too much tension in the back of the neck there, where you would feel that little bit of the head tilting forward. I've seen pictures of His Holiness meditating, and sometimes it seems like his head is way down here. But nonetheless, I don't think I'm not questioning His Holiness's meditation in the least. I'm just pointing out that it does seem that there's some leeway with some of these. You might need to see what works best for you. So any comments on the posture? I know there's another question here from Ken. But yeah, I'll talk about that maybe a little bit later. Yeah.
Did you see the one from David Lee?
Yeah, about meditation benches. Yeah, I think I mentioned that with so there are these benches. They're really quite useful for some people. Some people really like them because they allow you, by kneeling down with your buttocks on the bench, so that if your feet are loose underneath, they don't create any pressure on any of that. Your knees will be hitting the ground, but you don't have that strong, pressure on your knees or on the feet in any way. No points of contact that could be problematic. I think they work really well for some people. By all means, if you find that it's useful for you, you can do that. Other people even take their meditation cushion, if they sort of squash it around so that it can be more like vertical, and sit on it with the same sort of thing, so that you have the cushion underneath your buttocks rather than a bench. And then you can kind of keep the knees in place. And that works well sometimes to kind of alleviate some of the stress and pain that you might be feeling in the legs. But it is important, if you're feeling pain and that in the legs, and it becomes an obstacle, to do something to correct it in terms of correcting your posture. Getting a meditation bench or sitting in a chair for a while doing meditation can be useful. These are, again, when you're doing longer duration. I know a lot of teachers say, well, it's good to work with the pain and kind of see where the pain is at, and mentally, and that's fine, maybe, a little bit later on, but initially you want to make sure that you're comfortable doing your meditation. One of the things that is emphasized, especially with beginning meditators, is that you want it to be a good experience. You want it to actually be something where you get off of your cushion and you're looking forward to going back again. If it becomes something painful and awful and you're going, oh my God, I don't know if I can ever do that again, well, then that's not so helpful. I'll tell really briefly a story that how I first started my meditation practice before I even met Buddhism. I was a hospice volunteer in San Francisco, and there was a little advertisement. A man named Dale Borglum, some of you may have heard of him. He used to work with Ram Dass, even wrote a book with Ram Dass on meditation. He had a Saturday of meditation for caregivers, people who worked in nursing or hospice or whatever. And so as a hospice volunteer, I thought this sounded wonderful. I'd never meditated in my life. And I went out and I bought myself a little black meditation cushion, and I went up to this church in is it Fairfield, Fair Oaks? I can't remember the Fairfield, I think is the name of the Fairfax. I'm sorry, in Marin up there. Beautiful little church. But we were sitting on the floor of the church, cold stone, and doing 45-minute sessions of meditating. And I never got any instruction on how to sit, never got any instruction on really what the heck I was doing. It was just all these people coming together for a day of silent meditation. And I was like, oh my God, I went in the deep end. So it's really important that you find ways that make you feel good about what you're doing in meditating. It is challenging. It is hard. Don't expect it to be a breeze, but find something that, again, with your posture, with meditation benches, what have you, that supports you in that. Yeah, Abhishek, you've got a question? Go ahead and put on your mic. Yeah.
So with the hands, I know it says to rest them below, around the belly button area, but I like to put a cushion on my lap and rest them on there because it kind of helps me sit up straighter
Sure.
because it's the arms I'm pulling. And then sometimes I like to hold them in different postures. So I was just, and I consider those like, I guess, different mudras, or just, putting your hands on your knees, or putting them on your hips, or putting them more like this instead of like this sometimes, and I just trying to go with the feeling. So I was just wondering also about just raising them higher. Is it having it at that lower belly button? Because I can feel when I put my hands in front of my head or from my throat or my heart, I feel the different qualities for each. So I'm just wondering if it matters or if I should just go with my vibes.
I think following your intuition is perfectly fine. I think that, again, within the context of not always doing, changes within a single session or something, because I think that gets to be a little bit difficult. So find what you want to work with for that session or for that duration of time you're going to meditate, and sort of try to stick with that as best as you can. If you absolutely need to move it because of discomfort, then that's a different issue. But I think, there may be times where, again, it might feel different energetically to move the hands somewhere else, to, have them higher, lower, to different mudras, as you said, different postures. I don't think there's any real problem with that. Again, these things are not sort of fixed in stone. Nonetheless, the traditional posture, it's called the 7-point posture of Varochana, because this Buddha Varochana kind of demonstrates that posture. And it does seem to be a sort of posture that the Buddhas like to meditate in, if you will, or have developed that kind of skill within. But I think for all of us, we have to be very attentive to our own bodies and to what we feel energetically, what we feel intuitively in regard to what works best or not. In some Buddhist traditions, I never practice Zen, but I hear about, the Zen going around, some people going around with sticks and correcting your posture and doing all these things. I used to teach Tai Chi, and I would even go around and correct people's posture in various positions in Tai Chi. And I mean, there you've got a bit more of a precision that they're trying to get at. But in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, we're very accommodating, and so don't feel like you have to do everything exactly in the way that's on that sheet or that I'm describing it. If it feels better for you energetically and that you're more alert and attentive, then I would say go with that, definitely. Okay. Anything else, Abhishek?
No, I guess part of me, I don't mind the hand stuff because that's very intuitive, but the pillow stuff is more just functional. And part of me is like, oh, maybe I should try to focus on overcoming that obstacle, because it didn't used to be an obstacle. It actually became one later.
I don't think there's any problem with having a small pillow there for the hands to rest on. Again, some people, they just don't rest comfortably in the lap. And so I think that's perfectly fine. Yeah. And Doris has a question. Let's go to Doris and then.
Actually, Gen Don, excuse me. Sorry, Doris. Actually, T.H. Vaden has been waiting.
Where is that at? I didn't see it on the. Oh, is it at one of the hands that are up?
No, there are. Maybe if not, I'm sorry. If not, Doris, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to get to Ken's question at the end, but let me go to Doris, I guess. And if someone else had a question, you can put up your little hand thing, or you can put it in the chat box too. Yeah, Doris.
I see TH was there, so.
Oh, okay. Yeah. TH is, where is TH? I'm not seeing. This is, there. Hi, TH.
Sorry, I actually don't have a question. I'm sorry for making it seem like I have a question.
No worries, no problem. Good to see you. Good to meet you. All right, let's go to Doris then. Doris.
You actually cleared up a couple of questions I had in when you were going through the printout there. One was, I'm so relieved that I don't have to have my feet up on my thighs. My ankles won't do it anymore. So I do the parallel that you mentioned. And corpse pose. Yeah, good. Yay. I'm not in danger of falling asleep. I had a question. You mentioned about a connection on the palate when you have the tongue that way. If you could elaborate on that.
Well, from my understanding, Vasanta is here today with us. She's studied acupuncture. She's an acupuncturist. But when I studied acupressure and knowing a little bit about the meridians, according to the Chinese philosophy of energy in the body, qi in the body, there are the two main meridians, which are the governing channel and the central channel or central meridian. These two come together at the tongue. You have one that goes up and down and the other one that goes down the front of the body. And so essentially you're kind of creating an energetic link there. This is my understanding of what happens. Maybe Vasanta can clarify if I'm thinking of that correctly. But when I studied Tai Chi Chuan, which of course is based in Chinese medicine and Chinese view of the body and Qi and what have you, they emphasize that they actually say when you're doing your Tai Chi, you should keep the tip of your tongue on the upper palate because it kind of connects the energetic flow that ends right there at that point with the rest of the flow that starts with the tongue and goes down. So that's why I mention it sometimes, is because even though we're not doing Chinese medicine with this, there does seem to be something that happens with me energetically when I have the tongue in that place. Just kind of complete the circuit, if you will. Vasanta, do you want to share anything more on that? I don't know if you do. Chime in. Yeah, please do.
No, you were right. Very, very accurate description, Don. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Good. Thank you. But again, in Tibetan kind of looking at the body and these subtle channels and energies and what have you, I think there still is, again, I don't know all of the various channels, but I would think there still is some similar type of thing that we're doing by keeping the tongue there. But the main functional thing, of course, is to keep the saliva from being produced so much. And that does help in that regard, certainly. Okay. All right, let's see where we're at. Maybe I'll go ahead and deal with Ken's question before we kind of move on to the rest of the things about posture. It's about gurus. And, we have talked about this topic here and there, certainly at TNL. It's a topic that comes up frequently. The word guru in the Sanskrit is essentially, it means, there's different translations of it, but it essentially means somebody who's heavy with qualities, who has like a lot going on for them, kind of somebody who you see that you go, wow, I feel some awe and some admiration for that person and feel like they really have what it takes to kind of help me on my path. Not everyone is going to be a guru for you. Not every teacher that you have is going to be a guru for you. The Tibetan word for guru is lama. And essentially, people don't determine that they're lamas from their side. People are seen as lamas or gurus from the side of the students, and students or disciples who see a particular teacher as somebody who is heavy with qualities, who embodies these qualities, then can devote themselves to following that person. And there are certain ways that we do enter into that type of a relationship when we take refuge with a particular master, or take vows with them, or take a tantric initiation with them, or even, they say, receive a oral transmission, a lung of a sutra or a text or what have you, or a practice, from them. But essentially, you are the one determining how to have that relationship with a teacher who can help you on your path. Is it essential? Well, it is essential in the sense that it is, without the aid and benefit of those living guides in our lives, it's very, very difficult to make great progress. They can act, again, to help inspire and bless your mental continuum, to awaken your own inner guru. The role of an outer guru is simply that, to awaken your inner guru. We all have this inner wisdom, if you will, that abides deep within our minds, but we don't have the potential necessarily to actualize that. An outer guru can become a catalyst for doing that whole process. And of course, if we have the confidence, which is taught in Tibetan Buddhism, but is not an absolute and essential, but if you have the confidence that these holy beings are actually Buddhas working for our welfare in this world, well, then you can, again, maybe see that they've got greater qualities than just an ordinary bloke on the street, as Venerable Robina would say. They've got something more going for them, and you use the abilities that they have to help you more precisely. I don't have those qualities. I'm not trying to put myself out there in any way, shape, or form as a lama or a guru. I'm an instructor. I'm happy to give Dharma instruction, to teach Dharma wherever, whenever I can, and to the best of my ability. But I don't have any great powers. If you have a being who actually knows your mind, knows your karma, knows what's going on for you, your predispositions, and so on, well, then they can help you much, much better than someone like me can. Because I'm just guessing. I'm just saying, giving kind of general advice, saying this and that, and trying to help you on your path as best as I can. I can play some role in that, but we really want somebody who's imbued with these much greater qualities and who can therefore give us much more precise insight into how we actually progress ourselves on the path. So this is the idea behind a guru. The question is, what if you never meet the guru? Well, make prayers to meet the guru. That is part of it, just as we saw earlier, with that, what Rinpoche was saying. Every day we should think, may I meet a qualified Mahayana guru who has everything to help me quite specifically on my path of awakening. The dispositions that I need and what I'm looking for in a guru and so on. It's important to make those prayers. That's part of how it actualizes. And of course, creating merit, doing, meditative practices, other virtuous practices, and so on. I think these are all really important. And of course, in Tibetan Buddhism, there's a lot of emphasis on working with different Buddha figures, the Buddha of compassion, Chenrezig, Manjushri, all these different Buddhas who sort of represent the qualities that we're ideally looking for in a guru. So we can kind of use those as a support in the meantime until there's some manifestation in our lives of people who can actually, perform that task for us. So maybe that's enough for that for now, but know that, there's whole courses that we do on working with the spiritual teacher, the guru, that are part of Discovering Buddhism. And there's also a wonderful book by Alex Berzin that's about working with the guru as well. There is a question from Aida, and then it sounds like maybe somebody else has a question that they'd like to chime in with, but let me get Aida's. It has to do with bhumis. This is a Sanskrit word, bhumi. It means ground, literally. And by grounds, we're not talking about physical ground. We're talking about the different levels that one progresses through in developing your mind all the way to Buddhahood. For Bodhisattvas, those who have this mind of bodhicitta and who are developing along that pathway to enlightenment, there are 5 paths that are essentially ways that the mind gets developed, the consciousness gets developed, all the way to the 5th path, which is the path of no more learning, the path of complete Buddhahood. And I'm not going to go into all those in great detail. Again, I'm going to be doing a course on grounds and paths in March on Wednesday nights, and you can come and hear a bit more about grounds and paths. But these grounds or bhumis, they fall into the 3rd and the 4th path. The path of seeing and the path of meditation. And they are just a way of parsing up what one's mind is doing on that particular level of development in terms of moving closer and closer to Buddhahood. You move through what are called the 10 grounds. And the 10th ground is just prior to becoming a Buddha. And when you exit the 10th ground, you enter into that 5th path, the path of no more learning, you become a Buddha. So bhumis are simply, again, a way of measuring out the progress that a bodhisattva makes specifically within the path of seeing and the path of meditation to arrive at the path of no more learning. Again, I'll go into these 5 paths as part of that course if you can have a little patience on that. Otherwise, today could be a quite extensive talk on that. And then Nancy just asks back on the question of gurus, different gurus, root guru, heart guru. Alex Berzin divides kind of our Dharma teachers up into 4 categories. And again, Dharma instructor is one of those. The 4th category are gurus. Are gurus or lamas, beings who play that role, men and women who have these great qualities who we can follow at that level. And there are 4 different gurus. You have your preceptors, who are those who are like your refuge guru, taking vows with them, and so on. You have your Mahayana guru, and a Mahayana guru, generally you take some sort of Mahayana vows from, which is somebody who, again, has the ability to confer the Bodhisattva vows, either as part of a tantric initiation or as just a standalone vow ceremony. But they can also be just people who we follow because they teach the Mahayana well, and they are our support on our Mahayana path. They don't necessarily have to be somebody who gives us vows. So we have our initial sort of preceptors that give us refuge or lay vows. Then we have our Mahayana gurus who might give us bodhisattva vows, but are definitely a support in our bodhisattva practice. Then you have what are called your tantric gurus. Your tantric gurus are those beings who you take tantric initiation with. When you do that, they become one of your gurus. That's a consensual thing you're doing. By taking initiation with those beings, you are allowing them to enter into your life as your tantric guru. And they may even provide tantric instruction about how to practice the practices of the being that you've been initiated into, that Buddha or what have you. The fourth one is the root guru. What do we mean by a root guru? A root guru is probably one of these other three, maybe most likely somebody who's a tantric guru, though could be, just Mahayana guru, might be a preceptor, but nonetheless, a root guru. I like the way that Venerable Connie, who used to teach at TNL many years ago, she was here when I first came and started teaching. She said that Lama Yeshe described the root guru as the guru who makes your heart explode. The one who kind of really makes you turn towards the Dharma in a major way. It's like the one who you just feel so close to, so endeared of, because of what they've done for you, because they've helped you to really shift your mind. When you have that kind of an experience with the guru, then you know it, and you know who that heart guru is or root guru is, that one who does move you out of your sort of pre-Dharma state, in a sense, to really turning your mind towards the Dharma, with great dedication and commitment. And it may, again, you may have more than one of those. I think Lama Atisha, who was mentioned earlier, he came to Tibet about 1,000 years ago. He had over 200 gurus, and he had 3 root gurus. So don't think that you're looking for just one person to play all these roles for you. I mean, it might be in this day and age, if you do find one, that's great. Hold on to that one. That's an important being to play that role for you. But, the idea here is that you can have many people playing these different roles. You can have some people who, again, are even prior to being a guru, who are Dharma instructors for you and so on. And then you have other people who help you with rituals and meditation and what have you. And then you have, different people that play different roles at different times in your spiritual development. But ideally, it is good at some point to have at least one person who is a root guru for you. And again, that person, you will probably be more inclined to go to them for spiritual advice. But if you don't like that spiritual advice, don't go to another guru and think they're going to give you better advice. Try to stay with that guru as best as you can. They often use the example of a blind person who's on a very treacherous trail where there are great, like a precipice where they could fall into these canyons, and there's like a yak that's leading them. They say you hold on, if you're a blind person, you hold on to the tail of the yak for all your life, right? It's the same way with our gurus. If we find somebody who we really feel this strong connection with, then we hold on to that person. And we follow them as clearly and as best as we can, because we know that they will lead us to our goal. So, yeah, thank you for posting, Alex Burzin. I think his book may even be at that website that's Mary posted, studybuddhism.com. He's very loose with his publications. He doesn't, require you to go and buy things, what have you. But if you do download things from his website, it is good to maybe make a donation to his website so he can continue to supply more Dharma teachings and material for people. So. Wow, okay, we got to 11:55. Let's go back to posture real quick, because I think that was all the questions that I saw. Whoops, we're going to go back to the slides now around posture. Relaxation of the body within the posture is a key element for good concentration, and this will help to relax the mind as well. So that's why I say, again, tailor what's in the 7 points to your own physical posture and make sure that you get into a place where you can be somewhat relaxed. Now, relaxation is not the goal of meditation. It's just that if you don't have the body somewhat relaxed, the mind won't be as relaxed, and you're going to find it difficult to engage in prolonged practice. So that's the whole point behind that. It's not to say that, meditation is supposed to feel like you're getting into a hot tub or something. That's not what our meditation is for. Then I just have one more slide and then we'll conclude today, and that's in regard to the timing of your meditation. It's good to meditate around the same time every day so that you develop a habit. Now, some of us have schedules that are very hard, and on some days we don't have that time free, and other days we have a different time and whatever. Try to make it as consistent as possible. And that's just because, again, habits, this is how we develop habits, right? Is doing something around the same time every day with the same sort of pattern that really reinforces that. As for the duration, quality is better than quantity. So shorter sessions with better focus are preferred. And as I said earlier, when that happens during the day is really up to you. It's the advice that's generally given is that most people find that doing a meditation close to the beginning of one's day is better because their minds aren't so distracted. But nonetheless, some of us, get involved in other things, and then we find our meditation going till later in the morning or perhaps the afternoon or even sometimes in the evening. But do know that as your day goes on, most people get tired throughout that day, and it's very hard to sustain good meditation in the evening if that's the case. But some people are very different. They actually even have different tantric deities that are useful for night people who prefer to be meditating and practicing at night. So it's really up to you. But again, that last little bit about duration of the actual sessions, even Venerable Rabina often recommends just doing, if you say you're going to do 20 minutes or a half hour of meditation, if you know that the mind is going to be distracted for a good portion of that because you don't have a very focused mind, then do like 4 or 5 minute increments within that. Do 5 4-minute increments where you take a break after each 4 minutes just to stretch a little bit, let go of the practice, then do another 4 minutes or whatever, or 5 minutes. Better to do that and have good concentration for those shorter periods than to have a longer period and have the mind be totally distracted for that, most of that time. Remember, it was Pema Chodron in one of her teachings. She says that she remembered her first meditation period where she sat down, she heard the gong ring, and she was like, oh, this gong, it's so wonderful and nice. And then she doesn't remember anything until the gong rang again. She was just in la la land, the rest of the time. This is what happens frequently with us. So why spend all that time creating a habit of the mind being distracted for the duration of the time? Better to have a habit of the mind being very focused and clear for much shorter periods of time, and then elongate those over time. Eventually you can get to a place where you can go into meditation for 20, 30 minutes or longer with the mind very focused. So timing is a key part of it. And again, I'll just put that out there for everybody to examine yourself and see what works for you in terms of when it makes sense to make that as a regular part of your day, and then how much time to spend. And we had the question last week even about, well, how much time versus other practices or other things. Again, it's very individual. And so just find what works for you, but recognize that this is a very important part of our practice as we've been talking about today. Without a real focused mind, we're not going to have the power behind the mind. Those one more comment and then we'll close. Those 3 things that I mentioned earlier, that are the higher trainings of morality, concentration, and wisdom. The analogy that's frequently used for those is somebody who's trying to chop down a tree. So the person with the axe, first of all, needs the strength of morality. You need a very strong mind that isn't weakened by the delusions and the, unethical behavior we've done. So that's the strength of the axe person. The second one is the aim of the axe person. They have to be able to keep hitting the tree in the same place, right? If you're hitting the tree all over the place, it's never going to get toppled, right? So that's what we're trying to develop here, is that aim. That's the concentration. The third one is the sharpness of the axe. And that's what we're trying to develop with wisdom. And then again, that'll be the last perfection that we look at, is fine-tuning our wisdom so that we have the sharp axe with the perfect aim, with the strength that's behind it through our morality that will allow us to do that. So it's a nice little analogy that brings all 3 of those together and emphasizes the importance of having good concentration. Is there a final question maybe? I don't want to. Yes, Christopher. No. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I saw your hand up. Okay.
Gen Don?
Yeah.
Gen Don, I think Anna may have had a question.
Okay. Anna? Maybe, maybe not. No questions? Okay. It's kind of hard with this because, yeah, we got more boxes than what can fit on my screen. So I'm not sure I'm seeing everybody. And some people may not all have their cameras on either. So, all right. Well, if there aren't any questions that come up after this or that you didn't feel got answered, appropriately, please take note of them. And there will be opportunities in the future to do these. What I would encourage you to do, again, I'll have the posture sheet to Mary. That'll be out at the Dropbox. Maybe later today or tomorrow, sometime very soon. And then know that you might take a look at that and see what might need to be adjusted in your own meditation posture. But try to spend some time doing focused meditation over the next week if it isn't a normal part of your practice. If it already is, continue doing that. But for the next week, try to pay attention to what goes on in the mind. We're going to talk when we get back together next week about these faults that arise in the mind. And of course, the two main ones is that we tend to have an element of distraction. I always call this like going out, because the mind tends to want to be involved in other things and not be on the breath or whatever object we're meditating on. But then the other one is when we collapse in. And this is what we call like a dullness, all these factors that are about dullness of the mind. That the mind isn't so sharp because we've been overcome sometimes by something as gross as sleepiness, but in a lot of times it's just a fogginess to our minds that makes it very hard to meditate. Just pay attention to that and see where you are oriented in terms of your own practice. What is more predominant, that distraction factor or the dullness factor, or does it go back and forth between those? All right. Okay, so let's do some prayers to dedicate, close today. Thank you, Mary, for your help in getting those up. We're going to do the two main prayers that we generally do to dedicate, dedicating for, I'm sorry, we don't do those on the Sunday. We do this wonderful prayer from Master Shantideva. I forget sometimes. That's on Wednesday night. We do the other prayers. Here, before we do this prayer, let's think about all those beings that we're holding in our hearts. No doubt every one of us knows people who are going through difficult times, who are dealing with obstacles or illness, who are dying or who have died. Send this positive energy out to these beings and to all sentient beings as we recite these words. May all beings everywhere, plagued by sufferings of body and mind, obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored on finding repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness, and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments. Whatever diseases there are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power, and may people think of benefiting each other. And this wonderful verse that encapsulates our bodhicitta motivation. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. Perhaps we throw in just a special dedication for the week ahead with what's going on in this country, politically, what have you, that there may be peace in this, in all of our capitals, and especially in Washington, D.C., that people may find a way of giving voice to whatever their discontentment is in a very, non-threatening, non-harmful way, and that we may have good success for all beings in this world on the basis of what transpires this week. Then we do the prayers for our precious teachers. Whether these are your gurus or not, you can think about them as well as any other spiritual guides that exist and want them to have good health and long lives through what we've done here today, so that we and others can benefit from their presence. The wish-granting, wish-fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world, to the incomparably kind Tenzin Gyatso, I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. And then for Lama Zopa Rinpoche, you who uphold the subduer's moral way, who serve as the bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manjunath's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplish magnificent prayers honoring the three jewels, Savior of myself and others, your disciples, please, please live long And then lastly, for Tenzin Osalhita, Lama Yeshe's reincarnation. Venerable One, to you whose kindness exceeds that of all the conquerors for those wanderers in far-off places, especially the West, mindful of your loving concern for us in intentionally descending again into a family of a far distant land, we make this request. O Lama, please, please live long. All right, thank you all so much for joining today. I hope it wasn't too many words. Like I said last week, talking about meditation needs to be done, but actually doing it is so much more valuable. So I wish you well with your meditation practice this week. Please stay safe and healthy. I'll see you again soon. Okay.
Thank you, John.